Okay, welcome back. This is episode 27 of the Pregame Network podcast. Dan and Anthony again. Fucking Joe is too sick to join us again.
Yeah, he comes back.
Goddamn
He's
running
done
joke of the
from
show.
vacation, and he just fucking immediately just contracts something that affects his voice and throat. But kudos to him because he did send us a few things. One thing I will mention at the very least. But yeah,
Okay,
he's
cool.
sick, so he's out for this week.
Yeah, probably next week too. I mean, it doesn't sound like it's gonna heal rather
We'll see
quickly.
what happens. I believe in him. I'm sending him prayers. He'll be fine.
Oh, the fucking power of prayer.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, well, I'm finally back home, so it's nice to be back home.
Mm,
Uh, And I mean, I don't know. So I guess we should just jump right into it.
go for it.
What I've been playing really hasn't changed. I did beat the new Destiny dungeon, so that was cool. I think last week I was saying like how much like the game doesn't really do for me anymore ever since the final shape came out, but
Yeah.
the dungeons and the raids are like something I'll always go back to, so
Yep.
that's pretty nice. Um, and I did finally beat the new dungeon, so I'm happy
Hey.
about that. It was a good experience. They're rarely ever poor experiences, to be honest. So that's a net positive. I haven't touched God of War in a week or two, so that's still on the back burner. Um, I've been playing Space Marine 2 a little bit. I only beat the new mission like once. It's actually a lot more difficult than the other ones. And Darktide still has its fucking hooks in me. I don't know what it is about that game. It's just so much fun to me. I finally pushed my Steam account north of 200 hours, like I
Oh.
think at some point today or yesterday. So it's just, the game is just so much fun. I can't get enough of it. Like
There you
the
go.
only other game, the only two other games that I've played more than Darktide are COD and Destiny. So depending on how much Fat Shark adds to Darktide, it's probably not going to slow down for me.
That's
But
fair.
yeah, I mean, yeah, that's really about it. I have yet to dip a toe into the Remnant 2 DLC, which came out sometime in September, actually.
Hmm.
And it, like I think I told you about this like 2 weeks ago or something. Like I played like maybe 10 minutes, which I guess would be considered dipping a toe in, and I immediately got my shit pushed in. I'm like, I just can't invest into this right now. And I just got right off. It was too much for me. Um, so that's pretty much about all I've been playing. I actually
Hmm.
uninstalled COD on my desktop because I'm gonna have to reinstall it on the Xbox app because it's on Game Pass. I'm not gonna pay $70 for it.
Of course.
So yeah, so I have to take another 150 gigs or 200. It's something
It's
astronomical.
it's close to 200, if not over it. Maybe
Yeah,
like 210, something ridiculous.
yeah.
Compression is a
So
dying art form in our medium.
all those 4K texture packs.
Oh, of course.
Um, yeah, it's super quick for me, and nothing has really massively changed on my end. So what have you been playing?
Yeah, so I mean, the usual. I mean, I've been playing fighting games. Me and Harrison, we play those fighting games all the time. So we've been
Hmm.
sticking with the three after that massive thing. We're playing Street Fighter 6. We're playing Guilty Gear Accent Core Plus R, and we're playing Tatsunoko versus Capcom, and we've just been rotating through those. So like an hour to 3 hours a day.
Oh
Um,
God.
and it's nice. My brain is still kind of mush. It goes mush when we play a lot of fighters, but it's nice to be actively playing in those games and just having like something to go back to, and have enough to jump between and vary it and mix it up. Other than that, there's only been a few other things. I recently started replaying Resident Evil 4 remake.
Okay. Wait,
Because the
have you
what
beat it at all?
Yeah, I've beaten it once before. I got it on the PC for free,
Okay.
and because my PC isn't, it's not up to snuff, the modern stuff, it was kind of, it was whatever. I didn't judge the game based on how my computer ran it, but recently it went on sale and I had credits left over, and somebody gave me a gift card, so it was like, I think it was like $8 that I didn't have to spend in the end. So
Hmm.
it's like, so it's whatever. And I've been playing through it, and it's about as fun as I remember the first time. Like I said, my gripe with Resident Evil 4 Remake is that it just didn't need to exist. It's just,
A lot of people would disagree with you.
a lot of people can be wrong. Because whenever I say it doesn't need to exist, everybody's just like, but it's a good game. Like, yeah, no shit. A good game that, like, if you just took that gameplay and just made something else with it, it would be phenomenal. But it's like Resident Evil 4, the original, is one of the best games ever made. You don't remake those kinds of games, especially in like the span of time from the original release of Resident Evil 4 to when the
When
remake came out.
did that come out? Like, when was the original release of Resident Evil 4?
Was it? It was mid.
Was it over 20? Was it
mid 2000s?
over 20 years? No,
A
if it
little,
was mid 2000s, then
maybe like at the 20-year mark, because Resident Evil, the remake for Resident Evil, the first one came out in 2000, and that was part of a 5-game deal that Capcom had with Nintendo at the time, which also included Resident Evil 4 at first. So I want to say like 2003. I always get these years mixed up, but anyway, it's like, it's when you're going from like PlayStation or PS2 or like those old, that generation, like the 6th and before, there was a lot more leeway with remakes because the hardware was constantly evolving very fast. Resident Evil 4 is a complete package, and you know, I don't sing praises of a lot of games too often. I do like Resident Evil 4 quite a bit, but everybody, like, if you looked at top 100 games of all time, top action games, top shooters, top horror games, Resident Evil 4, the original, would show up all the time. This game was in the minds of many people perfect. You don't remake games that are perfect. You remake games that need to be remade. You know, that either fell short or they had to make cuts or anything like that, right? So I guess what I'm getting at is, like, Resident Evil 4 is a fun game. The mechanics are good. I think there's a lot of... I do take issue with a lot of the gameplay. I think there's a lot of arbitrary weight in how it handles, but it is still a very, 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 very fun time. They should have just made another game with that exact branch of the RE engine. That's my takeaway. Because in a lot of ways... and it's not something you can really do in like a 5-minute conversation offhand, but in a lot of ways there are things that the original does way better, and there are things in the remake that were cut or trimmed down or lessened in the transition to a remake. But that's a whole other conversation.
That's a conversation for a different day. Yeah,
that's I do, because and I can't really get into this because there's really no concrete evidence, but there are rumors that that after this wave of remakes ended, which ended with Resident Evil 4, like Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3, Resident Evil 4 remake, that was like as far as they planned ahead. There's rumors that Resident Evil 0 and Resident Evil Code Veronica are being remade right now.
Isn't Code Veronica like a particularly good Resident Evil game?
So it depends on who you ask. It's in this awkward in-between space between like the fixed camera Resident Evils and the action-oriented style that 4 kicked off, because it's the only one that uses dynamic cameras as opposed to fixed cameras, but it's not over the shoulder. It's got a very heavy action focus. A lot of people love Code Veronica. I'm not one of those people. I don't hate it. I do think it is on the lower end as far as Resident Evils are concerned, but that's why I think it should have been remade instead of 3 or 4. You remake Code Veronica. I can already tell there's a few things in Code Veronica that won't make it into the remake just because of modern sensibilities, and the main villains of the game are twins, and one of them is like, to cope with like the supposed death of his sister, he cross-dresses and pretends to be her, and I already know that whole plot line is just gonna get torn the fuck up in whatever remake they end up doing. But that's neither here nor there. The whole point is, like, when all the Resident Evil remakes are done, I do want to go back and I kind of want to gloss over them. But the long and short of it is, 4 is a good game. It just didn't need to be remade, so I'm enjoying it. But at the same time, every now and again, I encounter something where I'm just like, they didn't need to do this, or this was better in the original, or this is just unnecessary. And speaking of unnecessary, I've also been playing through Silent Hill 2 Remake with Luke and Harrison.
Okay.
It's
oh boy.
It was more unnecessary too, I would say. I don't know. There's a lot to say about that one too. It's actually funny because, like, I'm watching Luke play it, and it's like, why is there so much action in my Silent Hill? Like, I'll be playing the Resident Evil 4 remake, and it's like, one of the things that 4 did and 5 did and 6 did is like you aim for the arm or the head or the knee, and you can do different melee moves, right? There's that whole system in those Resident Evil 4s, and it's like almost in Silent Hill 2 to an extent. Like, there's people online that are just like, oh, shoot the guys in the knees for an easier time. I'm just like, that's not Silent Hill. Why are you doing this in my Silent Hill? Why is it so action focused? But there's a certain level of desperation there. I'll also say that with the Silent Hill 2 remake, a lot of the environments don't really work with over the shoulder. Like, a lot of it's very cramped, and not in like a claustrophobic horror way, but in a I can't see what the fuck's going on kind of way. But yeah, those have been the two primary games aside from the fighting games. I also tried this board game I had sitting in my Steam
Did you
library
just say
for a
board
while.
game?
Yeah, it's
okay.
a board video game. It's a
Okay.
video game that is a board game. It's called 100% Orange Juice. It's this Japanese thing, and it's basically just like this really fast pace. You're constantly rolling dice, and people are fighting each other and shit like that. And it's a good time killer if you have people that have it. It's not one I'd recommend to people who aren't necessarily into that style, just because I feel like they wouldn't get anything out of it. But it was interesting. It's got nice music too. But
Okay.
that's I've been broadening my horizons while also not doing that so much.
Having fun while being the best. Didn't think you hear that one, huh?
No, I say that place closed. That's ours now.
Yeah. Oh, Jesus Christ. We worked there for so long.
Oh, yeah,
Anywho, so, all right, I mean, that was, yeah, relatively normal time, I would say, for like
yeah,
what
I
we've
would
been
say
playing this past week.
Yeah.
Something that you sent in the news channel, what was today's date, the 21st, so like maybe a week ago, was that xDefiant is reportedly shutting down after just 4 seasons. People really took that rumor and ran with it because apparently Mark Rubin, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
the lead's name on that game. He's like, no, it's not going anywhere. We
Yeah.
have stuff planned, blah blah. But I think that game fizzled out really quick, especially
It
now
did.
with Black Ops 6 around the corner, which I do
Yeah.
kind of want to talk about that a little bit because they just put out a whole blog post about the progression and everything. I think it was today or yesterday.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Like
I mean,
my
I don't see xDefiant going anywhere
it's
personally.
it's so my whole thing with xDefiant, because I tried it and I played it. I played it with I think we played it with Eric, and then I know another guy I played it with for a little bit. And like, my takeaway while playing it is like, a good foundation. You could do something with this, right? I've always said about like the first person shooter landscape is you can't really try to compete directly with Call of Duty. You got to like find your own way around it. And for a bit, I thought they kind of found it, because it's almost like a hero shooter, but it really isn't, because of how they handle it. It's got those kind of abilities, but it's not really as big. It's almost like a kill streak replacement, the way they do hero elements in there. And I'm like,
Well, that's what I said at the very beginning. Like
Yeah.
it technically is a hero shooter, but they handled the abilities in such a way that it didn't feel like it was in your face, and that was the whole identity of the game, which is the whole problem with that genre to begin with.
No, yeah, no, I agree. What I mean to say by that little kind of tear down, that little breakdown, is like, it has its space, but I whenever I went and I played it, I was like, okay, it almost feels like an Xbox Live Arcade release, right? Because
That's
it
a
is
perfect
technically,
comparison.
yeah, it is like a smaller release, but it's by Ubisoft, and they're like using their plethora of IPs as representatives in this world.
Thora.
And I feel like they fell short of those expectations. Everything just feels so dull for like their attempt in
Yeah.
this space, despite the fact that the gameplay is pretty decent. I didn't hate the gameplay. It's almost like in between like the arcadey Call of Duties and the grounded Call of Duties. Like, there's this weird like middle ground that they found where it's like, it doesn't feel hyper realistic, but it's not like an arcade shooter. So I'm like, my only comment about xDefiant is like, I feel like they could have had something there, and it's right now there's a reason rumors like that are going around. That's the best way I'll put it.
Yeah, that's fair, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, I just wanted to bring it up because it was something I guess kind of noteworthy. Feel like the
Yeah.
reputation of that game is that of which a rumor like this could be very easily believed,
Yeah.
where it takes the head of the studio to be like, no, that's not true. We're still
Yeah.
making content for it. We have all these plans, blah blah blah, but like no one talks about
It's
it anymore.
yeah.
And really think that like with Black Ops 6 around the corner, which I do kind of want to pivot to that next, but
Mhm.
the way that Treyarch is handling the multiplayer and the progression for Black Ops 6, it's kind of like a nail in the coffin. Like COD is such a juggernaut that it doesn't xDefiant isn't a different enough clone that it
I agree.
uh that it's really going to stand on its own
Yeah.
to like
Yeah.
speaking of clones, I also tried the Delta Force demo. Completely forgot about that. We'll talk about that after, but
Yeah,
that's
but
something that
the last thing I'll say about xDefiant is that, like I said, my takeaway is that they had and could potentially still have the capacity for something that doesn't get steamrolled by Call of Duty. They could
Mhm.
stand not tall, but on their own without getting crushed. But I don't have much faith in Ubisoft in general. So, well, I guess we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, so I guess this is a good time to switch to COD talk because
Go for it.
we're 4 days away from the release of Black Ops 6.
Yeah.
It's going to be on Game Pass, so that's nice. I won't have to pay anything for it.
Mm-hmm.
And Microsoft is yanking the $1 uh, for the first month just before Black Ops 6 releases, which
Yeah.
is just fucking poetic, honestly.
Yep.
Um, but with that, like that's neither here nor there. I'm assuming you didn't see any of the blog posts today about the like how they're handling prestiges and whatnot.
I have not been paying attention to Black Ops 6 anything outside of when we played the beta, just because
Yeah.
it's we're gonna have it, we're gonna be able to experience it, and it's just like I don't like where Call of Duty is right now in general, and I'm not too keen on the
Well, I don't
upcoming
think it's
reset
going anywhere.
where we lose anything. I'm not saying it isn't. I'm just saying like if I miss it, I wouldn't. That's all. I'm just
Well,
saying. You can tell me. I'm just saying I'm not going to know anything. So yeah, you're
yeah,
correct in
it's
assuming I
fine.
don't.
Well, they're bringing back the old prestige system, which I think is a slam dunk. I I've been wanting that since like Modern Warfare 2019, which I can't believe it's been 5 fucking years since Modern Warfare 2019 came out. That's just crazy. That's absolutely bonkers.
Yeah,
Uh,
to an extent. I mean, you're talking to the wrong guy there, just because time seems to go so slowly for me. So, but yeah,
but like
it's been a hot second.
so you don't just roll into the next prestige, like you actually have to um opt in for the prestige. It'll reset everything, but like all your camo progress stage, which I think is kind of cool.
Yeah,
And you
this is
also don't have to rank up a gun anymore to start unlocking the camos on it. You can just
oh,
start doing it.
that's a good change. That's a good
It's a
change.
that's a huge change because
We've been asking that
the
for that
fucking
for
time
forever.
sink that you need. Oh my God, it's just so much. Um, uh, they also are adding in. Do you remember the Prestige shop from like Black Ops 2 or 3?
Like, I mean, there's been a few I feel prestige shops. Like, there's the ones that the older Black Ops games did, and then Cold War had a prestige shop too. So, I mean,
Did it?
yes, I remember it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right, they did. Well, they're bringing that back. Like, and you can buy the emblems from like the original Call of Duty games, from like
Ah,
the original Prestiges, which is tickles a nostalgia bone for me.
yeah.
I'm a big fan of that. I mean that was kind of like the gist of it. Those were really just the broad strokes. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
can have the fucking different calling card and emblem for every weapon that you use, and just like Modern Warfare 2. Um, the grind is much more streamlined now, which I think is a big
Yeah.
plus.
It's definitely
So,
something we've talked about before, where we're just like, listen, there are so many like arbitrary hurdles in like
mhm,
the unlock process. Like, it's like one thing, it's like, okay, you gotta use the gun for a bit to unlock attachments, but it's like to have like the more prestigious rewards like a camouflage or something, like there's absolutely no reason, given how high some of these milestones are, to unlock these camouflages, that you shouldn't be making progress with those right from the get-go,
yeah,
especially with some of the more ridiculous ones where it's just like, oh, long shots, which are always a pain in the ass, or like, oh, don't use any attachments. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to be doing that while I'm leveling the gun up, so why not just give me credit the entire time? The unlocking camouflage challenges has been stupid every time it's tried. There's been no reason for that to ever exist. And I've always kind of said that it was really just like an arbitrary way to inflate like the unlock system for the weapons, where it's just like, oh, you can level your gun up 50 times, but then it's like 26 of them are just unlocking camo challenges. There's no reason for that. So that's a good change.
So removing that barrier is very, very good.
Yeah.
Honestly, oh man, I feel like every time a new COD game comes out, it's like we're removing more and more barriers to entry for like the mastery challenges and rewards, which I like because.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm an old man. I'm an old man now. I don't have the time to sit there and grind this shit out.
It's
so,
definitely one of the few things to kind of keep us going in it, just because it's just like, it's one thing if you have all the time in the world, but even those people, like, nobody deserves to have those like hurdles thrown in their faces, like all the shit that essentially, even though it's not a literal time gate, it time gates it in its own bizarre way because of how much shit you need to do to do something as basic as an unlock that you're going to be getting anyway. Just, I don't know. It's streamlining is a good word for it, because a lot of it really just has been unnecessary from the get-go.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of like the broad strokes of it. We don't really have to go into that much detail because it's just not. I mean, it's a COD game. But I did play Delta Force beta or demo. Yeah, demo for Steam Next. Steam Next Fest. There you go.
Yes.
I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I was going to.
Ooh,
And
that's not a good sign.
Yeah, well, like, because it really is a Battlefield clone, but it's like knockoff Battlefield, and they have. I like the customization and the progression, and but it is tough to explain. Like, it's so rough around the edges, at least the build that they made available to the public, that I just I didn't have that great of a time with it, because like every time I would spawn in, it's like you would get killed from like a random location that you had no way of preventing, and then and then and then it's you just you respawn and you run back to the same place and the same thing happens again. I mean, maybe that was just a skill issue. I didn't stick with it long enough, but it felt rough around the edges. Is the best way that I could describe it. And I tried that extraction mode just very, very briefly, and it is so much more in depth than DMZ ever was. It's a little bit more streamlined than Tarkov, because like that's hardcore extraction shooter type of, that's much more hardcore style of game. But I think they called it like tactical turmoil. That was the name of it on the menu, which like made me chuckle, because that was such a dumb name. Like the studio's naming conventions are not great. First it was Delta Force Hawk Ops, which is just fucking retarded, and they finally dropped the Hawk Ops. It's just Delta Force, which is all it should have been from the get-go. And the extraction mode is I've been hearing what the hell was the name of it? They've been calling it Hazard Ops, something like that.
I think that sounds right, because I think you've said that to me before, so I'm going to assume that's correct.
And then I load up the main menu and it says tactical turmoil. I don't understand. I purposely didn't click it when I first booted it up, because I didn't know what it was. I thought it was like a tutorial mode, so I didn't click on it. And then I did. I was like, oh, this is that extraction mode. So I loaded into it, and there's like 6 different types of the same assault rifle ammo that fit the same gun, that have like completely different different properties for different things. Like one's armor penetrating, one is like incendiary, one has like a hollow point. Like it's I don't know. I think it's a little bit too complex for me. I just want them to bring back DMZ. I think that was like the perfect type of extraction shooter for me. I have simple mind. Basic neuron activation is all I require.
Uh,
Uh, so yeah,
unfortunately,
I
because
don't
I don't
know if
know if
I'm
that's
gonna.
that. Yeah, I don't know if that itch is gonna be scratched anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean maybe I'll re-download it once the 1 or the early access comes out because it's like the build that I played was very old. Like it was, there were still things in it that I remember seeing from like the alpha that was maybe, and maybe this was an alpha, maybe this wasn't just the beta build, but it just didn't feel ready to me yet, which I guess
Mm,
explains why they're going to go into early access, but
yeah.
that is what it is.
No.
So I will keep you posted on that, but I I thought I was going to like it more than I actually did. So, who knows?
I mean, that's another thing. It could also be just the disconnect from watching it as intently as you have been, versus like the actual
That's
outcome.
fair.
Because that is this is a game that you've been mentioning to me quite frequently. So
Yeah.
there might just be some disconnect. Who knows? Like you said, you'll get back to me on it. But I guess if your metric was it needs to be just like DMZ, or it needs to
No,
be
no, no, no,
very
no.
similar
It
to that.
doesn't need to be just like DMZ, but there is a lot of systems going on at the same time,
Okay.
and I think I I don't know if I want to think that hard about it right now.
Mm. That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah. Anywho, what else? What do you have?
Um, there's a few things. I've been paying attention to some of how would I put this? I've been keeping an eye. There's a new Sonic game coming out, right?
Okay.
And I say new. It's a remaster of one that came out 13ish years ago. It's called Sonic Generations, and the one coming out is what is it? Shadow X Sonic Generation, Sonic X Shadow Generation, something like that. I get the two mixed up. It's one of those titles that I know, but I get it mixed up in my head because I haven't played it yet. And I'm just sitting here going, "Oh, this is a good time," because I loved that. I loved the game when it came out, right? So I'm just like that, but new coat of paint, some new content, which is every time we hear more and more about it, there's more content than there was before as far as this new side mode that they're adding, where the focus is on the character Shadow. But
Mhm.
and
That
it
doesn't surprise me
ran.
since the new movie is supposed to have, or they're making a Shadow movie, right? It's not just
It's
a
it's
Sonic movie
it's
with Shadow in it.
yeah, no, it's the third Sonic movie. Shadow
Right.
is the main antagonist in it, and there's rumors that
Oh,
they, if this does well, they're gonna do something with him, past this. And it's actually interesting that you say that because one of the DLCs that will be coming to the game post launch is like a level based around the movie with Keanu actually coming and voicing Shadow for this
yeah, that
one.
was going to be my next
And
question.
yeah, yeah, he'll be voicing the character just for that mission in the game. But but my excitement unfortunately has been marred a little bit because
Yours? Really?
yes. So there there's a guy who's been doing writing for the Sonic comics for a while. I'm not big into the comics, but like I know about him and I know some of the stories he's written, and he was very well revered for a long time. Like a lot of the fans think that he writes great stories for the character and the universe, and he's been doing a lot of contract work for Sega. And the first thing he fucking did when he got his hands on this game, which I will remind you has existed for over a decade,
Hmm.
is he like backwards injected all of the localization shit that I fucking hate.
Uh,
Like, and it's, you gotta understand, Dan, this is a Sonic the Hedgehog game. There is not like there's no pressing political issues. There's no fucking there's no heinous amounts of fan service out there. There's
well,
no
how are they
fucking
going to take all
there's no
the carbon
slurs.
emissions out of the
Listen,
Green Hills?
Dan, they're editing out fat jokes and like removing like any slight hint of like relationships that aren't platonic, and they're removing slapstick. And I'm just like, who are you doing this for? It's a game that anyone from my age when I first started playing Sonic to my age as I am now could just play and enjoy. I played this game fucking over 10 years ago, and it wasn't like some like what's the best way? It wasn't some controversial. There was no controversy around the game. Nobody was running. It was so inoffensive in so many ways, and the like it's a hack job too, because like they're grafting new elements onto this old game without making adjustments. So it's like lip syncing isn't the same anymore. Actions that the characters are doing don't make sense. I'm just like, why? So that's what I'm doing. Like
Because
this,
fuck you, Anthony. That's why.
the crazy thing to me, Dan, is at the beginning of the year, or whenever the game was announced, I said to myself, you know what? If all else fails, if all these other games that I'm expecting this year just like crash and burn, I can at the very least just say to myself, they can't fuck up a game that came out 10 years ago just by adding content to it. There's no way. They can't fuck this up. And it turns out it is going to be
You would be wrong.
one of the most bizarrely localized and censored games in the last decade. I talk about remakes removing shit. This is just a remaster of an inoffensive game, just getting unnecessary changes to characters and dialogue and visuals and character traits. Like, oh, you can't have characters have crushes on each other. Oh, you can't make fat jokes. Like, not even fat jokes, but it's like I don't want to fucking sit here and rant too much about Sonic, but the whole point is like I'm just stunned. Like this game comes out either tonight or tomorrow or this week some point, and it's just like I guess I'll just have to wait until I can once again get it for free to play it, or I could just go back and play the original. So I guess we'll see what happens. There's also a lot of inconsistencies with the writing too. Like I bitch about censorship because it's just there's no reason for it, but it's like how hard is it to keep track of a Sonic story and that be your one job and you fuck it up? Because there's story inconsistencies too, shit that I knew when I was a kid and was able to play the game and understand they fuck up. So it's just how they fucked up the simplest thing I could possibly think of to release this year. I don't know how, but they did. So that's my little grumpy rant for the week.
No, it's not. There's going to be another one. I know it.
Yeah, it's possible. You never know.
Anywho, what else is going on?
So I'm obligated to mention this just because our as we mentioned at the beginning, our poor friend Joe is he just can't speak for himself right now, unfortunately.
Is this going to be something about? Oh, don't tell me. Hold on. I know the. NetEase? No, it's not the company. What's the company?
You're close. Starts with an N.
I know. I'm close. Nexon.
Nexon. Yes. There you go. So I did a little bit of reading. I'm not too familiar with the case just because I don't keep track of Nexon all that often. Outside of just knowing that they have shitty practices. Apparently Nexon is trying to get data from Discord, like user data, because of quote-unquote copyright infringement. And as far as I can tell, because the article's honestly not that great, I read through it. I think it relates to like people running private servers and spreading mods around. And apparently they've been like Nexon has been like bringing Discord to court, like they are about to bring them to court again, or they're fighting them in court after they already did this last year. And they're just trying to like get user information so that they can sue. And I'm just two things. Number one, that's so ridiculous. So going after people over private servers and mods, like that's nuts. I mean, I guess it's
pretty common. I feel like
it's getting more common, especially from Asian developers, Korea, Japan, China. Like I've talked before about how certain Japanese companies have been going after mods because it's so weird. Like the Asian markets and the leaders in those areas, they're like super boomers when it comes to technology, like where like they don't quite grasp why people would do things, right? Like it's actually funny. About a decade ago, is actually a good example. A decade ago, Street Fighter Cross Tekken, which is Capcom's crossover fighter with Street Fighter and Tekken. They made that, and they had a lot of characters on the disc, like models and incomplete characters, so they could complete them later or sell them later at a different price. So it was on disc DLC, right? And the partners in the US said, hey, you can't do that. People are just going to data mine the characters. And Capcom's response was essentially, why would anyone do that? Like, they're just out of touch with what people, like, do technologically wise. So it doesn't surprise me that these companies are doing it, but that's still asinine. You can't go after people for mods and private servers and shit like that. But, I mean, everybody's open up to that because of kind of like what we talked about last time we were sitting around, where it came to digital licenses and all the stuff that's kind of blanket written in there, and nobody takes those license agreements seriously, but they still open up and give people grounds to that. And I guess my whole take on this situation is, yes, company policy is shitty, but as a personal pet peeve of mine, people should not be running this stuff on Discord anyway. Discord is terrible for like a forum replacement for things like that, like ongoing projects and modifications and shit like that. Discord is shitty and terrible for that. They're generally bad with user data, but like they're open to companies kind of going after them like this. But just in general, it's a bad place. So just I hope this one wakes up some people to realizing like, hey, these companies suck. But two, also get your shit off of Discord. Do it like somewhere else. You don't need to be you don't need to be open. You don't need to run shit like this. Use it for communication, but don't host your files on there. So that's
yeah. At that point, they're barely even yours.
Yeah, it's just it's a pain in the ass. You run the risk of losing it, even if you're not under attack. Things just go missing. People can't access it. It's just a pain in the ass. I'm not gonna be the one to champion the charge to go back to forums. That's just like an uphill battle, and I'm not really, But forums would probably be. Forums still exist. They're just not hyper popular. If you want growth, you go to like something like a Discord. But if you you can still run a forum if you really wanted to. But
yeah, if you wanted to, but you also need users that are gonna interact with that forum, and like that's such a. I hesitate to use the term antiquated, but it's such like a thing of the past to like sit there and refresh a page, to wait until somebody responds to whatever you were gonna say.
Yes and no. I mean that's a whole other conversation. I think that people much too quickly tried to use the convenience of chat rooms to kind of invalidate or what's the word I'm looking for?
I think anything with like a word written on a screen is
hasten unnecessary obsolescence. To
hasten unnecessary obsolete. Man, you really reached deep for that one.
Yeah, no, I was looking for obsolete, but I didn't. I needed to lay out properly in a sentence. I'm not even sure I did. But anyway, the whole point I'm getting at is that for friend groups and small projects, do whatever chat room you want. But for long-term, like running things like private servers and mods, you shouldn't be on Discord in the first place. Not that I'm standing for Nexon suing and trying to get user data from Discord. They should just keep their fucking hands away from these people. It's overreach, but that's to be expected from companies in that particular reason. They're backwards in a lot of their views and they're very limited when it comes to their grasp on technology and communities. So
yeah, I mean that again, like you said, super boomers. I don't know if that's gonna change either. That's just like gonna be a changing of the guard situation.
Yeah, probably. Although I'll be completely honest, some of the people in our age bracket, a little older and a little younger, like they're not too technologically literate either. It's actually funny.
Yeah.
Like I like when we were like, and this is a side. This isn't even a video game thing, but when we were younger, I was always thinking, it's like, oh my god, people, I grew up on computers. My buddy Dan grew up on computers. We grew up using computers, and people a little older grew up on like the computers before that, like the Commodore and the older stuff, right? And we all got really good at using computers, and then we learned from there, and we're just good at this shit. And I remember thinking to myself, like 10, 15 years ago, I'm just like, these kids growing up on this new technology, they're going to just be able to blow me right out of the fucking water.
No, it's a regression, which is kind of
amazing.
I know.
It's crazy. It's the dumbing down of these products. It's just like, there are kids these days
because the introduction of the GUI was like, that was like the beginning of the end, because you had no reason to go into any kind of like a command prompt or a like an SSL or no, that's not the SSL or like a secured shell or a fucking PowerShell window or something, and do something by hand, like line by line with the code or with the instructions. And I mean, you're absolutely right. Like, in the age of the iPad and just all of these super pretty user interfaces and GUIs, it's kind of amazing how we went the other direction as far as like technological education goes.
And just tech literacy in general.
Yeah.
Like there are kids out there that don't know what a zip file is, and kids.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, there's also kids that don't know how to use a can opener. So I mean, there's a lot of problems out there right now. But you know, that's just what came to mind. I'm just like, you know, it's actually funny. That might be part of the reason. Like the fact that mods are being shared on Discord might be part of the reason. Like we're at peak regression. Like there's horror stories out there, just like, hey, you know, how do I fix this? Or hey, I want to download a mod for my game, and you'll send somebody the zip file, and they're just like, this file's broken, it's not opening.
Yeah,
like,
how do?
Yeah, how do? And just on the bright side, that means you know, IT is a good place to fall back on, because the old and young are gonna need IT people for probably the remainder of our lives.
So that's something that I actually did with Dark Tide a lot. I do like to mod it quite frequently. It does make the game way better. And it's one of the few games that I play that actually has official mod support, which is nice. So I have to download a lot of those zips.
Yeah.
Well, what the hell do I do with this thing?
You're already in the top 1%. Congratulations.
Anyway,
yeah, back on track.
What else do I have to talk about?
What you got?
I mean, the only other thing was Killing Floor 3. They came out with like a making of video, and I'm kind of split because they're going in like the way of specialists and heroes, but yeah, like the overall atmosphere still seems fine, but I don't know. They're moving away from the perk system that the second game was known for, which made it so good. So I don't know. We're gonna see how that one shakes out. I still think it's gonna be fun. I don't know if it's gonna be like the Killing Floor DNA that I have been playing for like the last decade, maybe longer, probably longer actually. When did Killing Floor 1 come out?
A long time. That was source. That was a gold source mod, right?
Killing Floor 1? It was long time ago.
Yeah.
I'd have to check my playtime or check something on my Steam, but I've been playing Killing Floor for a long time.
Yeah, I look at the information you give me with like, oh, return to specialists and that kind of thing, or going to specialists. I'm just like, that seems like a regression to me, because like we've talked before about how Killing Floor 2 launched and how it ended and where it was in the middle and how it kind of it feels like at a certain point it like let the mechanics breathe, as far as like, you know, who you choose and, you know, what your specialty is, you know, and what abilities and passives you get. And it feels like they took the lifetime of Killing Floor 2 and all the things they learned and improved, and then just said like, okay, let's start over again with based on this, just the little thing that you've told me about Killing Floor 3 so far. Not saying it's inherently bad, but it feels like I don't know if that's a step I would have taken, you know.
I don't know how deep that system is going to run, but it seems like it's pretty integral to the whole experience. So I don't know. Apparently Killing Floor 1 came out in 2009, by the way. So not quite, well, no, almost 20 years. We're coming up on it'll be 20 years when, 2029. We're almost there already. Fuck. So yeah, it's been a long time, and I don't know. I think they're slowly losing their way. God knows what the monetization is going to be for that game. Remember the Killing Floor 2 monetization? Holy shit! Talk about a spider web.
That wasn't even from the ground up. That's something they added later.
No, yeah, they injected that shit in after the fact, and it is the most confusing thing I've ever seen in a game.
You know what I'm thinking of? Now that like the way that we're talking about Killing Floor 2 and 3 and everything, it's reminding me a lot of Payday. And going from 2 to 3.
2. Oh, I mean, I played Payday 3 for
I don't know. Everything I've heard and seen about, like, it just I'm just thinking you had Payday 2, and just over time it just got egregious with the monetization, and then Payday 3 had a less than spectacular launch.
That's one way of putting it.
Yeah, so I don't know. I'm seeing some weird parallels. I don't know if the stars are aligned for our friends with the Killing Floor team. So
I don't know. Tripwire doesn't really have a bad track record, though, which is kind of what's concerning.
That's true. But everybody has their first, so I guess we'll see what happens.
I mean, it's supposed to come out, I think, in like February or something. So we'll see what happens. I will surely keep you posted on that. But I don't really have much else beyond that.
You made me think of something because you just said like, oh, they don't have a terrible track record or anything like that. You know who
Mm.
does have a terrible track record?
Oh.
Bloober Team.
Oh.
Yeah, the guys that did the Silent Hill 2 remake.
Silent
And I'm
Hill.
just
Yeah.
yeah, and like I don't want to sit here and rant about Silent Hill 2 until we finished it, but I just think about like they've earned a little bit of respect from me, just a little bit.
Oh yeah.
Because here's the thing, they came into like being well known when they did Layers of Fear back in 2016. They have some games before that, like some cheap mobile stuff, stuff you'd see on like the Vita or DSiWare or iOS, and like that's the extent of it. But they really came into their own on with Layers of Fear. Now, Layers of Fear, I don't like all that much. It's one of those psychological horror games that everybody loves to go. Ooh, I watched it on YouTube and I liked it a lot. Or I watched my favorite streamer watch it and it gave me the spooks. That kind of shit. And then they did a game called Observer, which had a big name. Yeah, it was kind of like a noir kind of story, but it was also horror, and it was like a Blade Runner inspired thing. I think Rutger Hauer was in it. I think that was like the big name they got for it. I think he was the main character, and because I that's one I didn't play. I'm not going to judge that one too harshly because I watched somebody else play it, but it didn't really strike. It struck me as just more of the same. And then Layers of Fear 2 came out and it sucked. Blair Witch came out and it sucked. The Medium came out and it sucked, and all these games are just like they're like poorly executed games based around semi-interesting concepts, or at least things you could do something with, and like that you could tell that their passion is in presentation, right? Which is why I was so fucking worried about the Silent Hill 2 remake, right? I'm just like, these guys, they're gonna get memed into it, and they did get memed into it, but two things. While I did say before that the Silent Hill 2 remake is unnecessary and I'm not really impressed by it, their Silent Hill 2 remake is leagues above the other shit that they've made so far. Leagues above it. Like, if everything they were making were like 4 to 6s, Silent Hill 2 remake is like a 7.5, maybe even an 8. It's still unnecessary. It still doesn't really do the original justice, and there's a lot of key cinematic presentation issues that the original just completely demolishes this remake in. That deserves its own video and its own thing. But recently, right before Silent Hill 2 remake came out, they said, we're turning a new chapter. We're going to Bloober Team 3.0 is what they called it, where they wanted to do more action-oriented stuff. They wanted to do more combat. And recently, they put out there was an interview where they said, like, yeah, we kind of know all our games suck, but we don't want to suck anymore. I'm just like, that you get a little bit of respect from me. So you made me think of it when it's just like, these teams have certain track records. This team has such a shitty and terrible track record, and I'm glad they're acknowledging it. Silent Hill 2
They don't want to
remake,
be shitty anymore.
Exactly. They announced something at the Xbox Partner Showcase called Chronos, The New Dawn. And
Okay.
I mean, it looks more promising than all of their other things, and it doesn't have the baggage of one of the biggest names in horror attached to it, so I'm not going in worried. But I find it funny, at the very end of their trailer, they showed just like 45 seconds of like raw, like third person walking and aiming footage, just to show like, yes, we're doing a game with combat. Yes, we're doing a game with action. It's not just walking and staring at shit anymore. We're actually doing a game, right? So that's just interesting. I'm curious to see where they go. I'm not watching with bated breath, and you're gonna have to dig yourself out of the hole if you want me to even like not go whenever I hear your name. And I definitely don't want them remaking any more Silent Hill games. They should really not go anywhere near it. The only Silent Hill game they should have touched is Silent Hill 4, but nobody wants to touch Silent Hill 4 because everyone only wants to remake good games, not bad ones. And anyway, I'm gonna rant about them. But that's just something I found interesting is they did an interview where they said like, yeah, we're done making shitty games. I'm just like, well, at least that's self-awareness is hard to come by in this industry.
First step.
Yeah, and it's hard to come by in this industry, which actually rolls cleanly into the last thing I have on the list.
Okay.
Shawn Layden.
Who?
Shawn Layden. He was in charge of Sony for a while.
Oh, Shawn Layden?
Yes.
Okay, you cut out the first
Oh
part.
yeah, Shawn Layden. He's been ever since he left Sony. I don't even know what he does anymore, but he seems to have a lot of time on his hands.
Hmm.
Has constantly been talking about the state of the industry, and he said a few things recently that kind of like made me want to tear my hair out. Uh, the first thing he said was he was just like, "Oh, the console wars are nearly over. You know, we've plateaued. The hardware's gotten to the point where you can't really tell the difference. Everything needs to be fine tuned. Who cares about ray tracing in 8K if the sun's coming through the window on your TV? You can't see it anyway." And I'm just like, no, yeah, I agree, but like, you were like the least friendly executive during your tenure, and you were constantly pushing for this console warring stuff. But it's like the second you step away, you have like this moment of clarity where you're talking about like, oh, it's not
Yeah, well,
tenable.
hindsight.
And here's the thing, I agree with his position, like where he's coming from with like the graphics. I've always said this for a while. We've been talking to before the podcast even rebooted, and during like every week with the podcast, I always say tech has plateaued. We just need people to do something with them. I disagree that there shouldn't be like different factions driving, competitiveness between them. So him saying like, oh, it's over and you just get a good processor, like that future is bland, and I don't want that, and I don't need that. There needs to be like consoles competing with each other. And the other thing that he said was that like was that double A is dead. And I
That's a
don't.
lie.
Here's the thing I said about that. I don't know if he meant that like it's been dead for a while and it needs to come back, or if he was commenting on the current status of double A, which is like I think it's coming back in a certain way. But I just find it crazy. Obviously like this happened after his time, but I find it funny that like he was the guy that kind of was right in the middle of Sony like losing its roots, essentially. Like he was the chief at that time when it became more of a California company and less of a Japan company. And that was when Sony was really shrinking its views and what games it was putting out. So like that throttling of double A that we're really just only starting to come out of, it happened, or like the seeds were sown under his watch, essentially.
Right.
So I'm just when you say like,
It just seems like carelessness, honestly.
it is. I can't stand this kind of guy that like when he's around and he's in charge, he has all these different things he says, and it's just like immediately when he's not in charge, he has like all these different opinions that like are just incongruous with what he was originally saying, and it's just like you guys need to be like as honest as you can be. Obviously, people at the top have very little honesty when it comes to that. I think the only hardworking and honest executive in my cognitive lifetime is probably Iwata, the guy who was in charge of Nintendo before he died, because he was like he was always on the ground level working on product. He was always treating things as they needed to be treated. He was always he made the company more open and honest, in my opinion. And it frustrates me to hear like these people, they like check out of these major companies and they just like they have all this shit to say on the side. It's like, what were you doing when you were in charge? But it's just like, oh, you push and you push and you push, but then as soon as you're out, you just realize that it's not even tenable. So you kind of set up the dominoes to fall in this really bad way, but you're standing here on the sidelines with us going, well, I don't know what happened. Like, so that's just something I thought was he's been very yappy since he left Sony. I've noticed
Very yappy.
he has like every other month, like I hear like some either completely obvious take that we've been saying for as long as he's been relevant, or like he's saying something that makes no sense but would just be worse for the industry. It's almost like
Honestly, it
the kind of
just
guy,
sounds like another suit.
he is. That's all he was. He is.
Yeah,
like back
I know.
yeah, but yeah. So that's all. That's the only thing I can really think of is I'm thinking of like things that are like ironic or shit like that. That's just something that came to mind.
Right. All right, that's fair enough, I guess.
Yeah.
I do remember seeing that whole like, oh, graphics don't really matter anymore in the past. I guess it's kind of ironic that he's saying that after he's out of the company. So
Yeah.
fucking just
And
calling the pot calling the kettle black. I don't know. That's hard.
it's
Wrong.
like
Figure of speech.
he helps push the issue. He leaves, he calls out the issue, but he doesn't call out any solutions. Like he doesn't point to something going, "Hey, this is this now it's time to focus on this." He just says it's all pointless. It's like imagine being that guy. You just there's no point to all this anyway. Like that's the kind of like view I get from him.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
but
at least he's not with Sony anymore.
yeah, it's true.
But
Yeah,
yeah.
all these
Anyway.
suits just they're all the same.
Let me run my own video game company. All right. Well, I mean, that's pretty much all the time that I got for this episode. I don't know about you.
Mhm. Yeah, that's
All,
good for
all
me.
the topics too, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess that will wrap up. What did I say? 26 earlier today or earlier this episode? Yeah,
Is it
26.
27?
So
Yeah,
no,
okay.
27.
There you
27.
go. 27.
This is episode 27. That will wrap up
Yes.
episode 27.
Okay.
For the based on the average of the videos over the past 30 episodes for like the 30 people watching or listening rather. Thanks for
About, yeah.
listening.
Yeah.
It's steady growth.
Yeah.
Steady growth. And uh, same place, same time next. Well, probably not the same time. We always kind of fluctuate, but
Yeah.
next week,
Yeah,
as always.
next week. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Bye.
Bye.